Hello, friends, and welcome into the Fantasy Pros Football Podcast. I'm Chris Welsh. Today, I am joined by that illustrious, bald-headed host who is put in the analyst seat today, Joe Pisapia, and my best friend, Scott Bogman. Joe Pisapia is also my best friend, yes, but I've known Bogman for almost 30 years. It's ridiculous. So both of these two, the most important people in my fantasy world, along with you, the listeners. So thank you guys for hanging out with us, where today we are going to be talking about the top 36 ranks and their tiers over on Fantasy Pros ECR. Joe Pisapia, how does it feel to have not spoken for 30 seconds into a podcast? How anxious are you?
I am shaking right now.
I can see it.
Give me my hit.
My sweat is pouring down my bald head. No, honestly, it's great. It's like a vacation to me. This is why I like doing the TV on Sundays on Sports Grid, too. I just have to sit in the two-chair, talk about the games. You have all the ad reads. You have all the responsibility. You have the time issues. This is great for me. And I will take the moniker of your second best friend. That's fine.
Yeah, or you guys are my best friends. I will tell you, when I am in the host seat, though, I feel like I have to do the hair, so I had to get all dolled up and pretty for it. Bogman, with all the hair in the world,
same.
You are going to be put to the test, Boggs, because these are going to be ranks that are not going to be yours, and you're going to hate it, and we're going to poke and we're going to prod. Are you ready to poke and prod at tiers and ranks, again, that you don't agree with?
Well, listen, as we learned in, oh my God, I can't remember the name. What was the comic book movie where he says, "I'm not in here with you, you're in here with me"? Which one was that?
The Dark Knight, I believe.
No, it wasn't the Dark Knight. It was
Sounds very Deadpoolish.
The way you did the voice, wow.
Yeah, it was.
You're really nailing it.
It was the guy with the mask who had the mask that changed.
Deadpool. Oh, there's a mask in a comic book? I can quickly lock that one down.
Rorschach was his name.
What is that?
The Watchman. Thank you,
yes,
Watchmen.
The Watchman. That is a great scene in the prison.
Yeah.
Yes.
That is you're stuck here with me, with my ranks.
Yeah,
more
and when
than
you said
I'm
mask,
stuck with
I
ECR.
should have, of course, known.
This could not have gotten off to a better
I
start.
said the thing that changed. Do you not know that? And then I said Rorschach. So yeah, you're welcome. Thank you. Glad we can figure that all out, you jerks.
All right, perfect.
These are my best friends too, guys. It's gonna be.
By the way, I've done a perfect job as a host. I've got you both riled up. So that's going to lead into everything that we've got here. I'm excited to do it. But first, I want to announce a winner, because we love to give away stuff here, and you are going to have opportunities. As a matter of fact, I'm going to tell you in a second how you can win the next big prize. But we have a winner for the Trophy Smack Draft Kit that we've been talking about here on Fantasy Pros, and the winner for the 2024 NFL Superstar Trophy Smack Fantasy Football Draft Kit is Joe Anarumo. Oh, Joe, congratulations. Please get in touch with our customer support agents at mailbag@fantasypros.com with your mailing address, proof of your subscription to the Fantasy Pros YouTube channel, and we're going to get that kit out to you. Again, the winner is Joe Anarumo. Congratulations, Joe. Not Pisapia, but this Joe. Now, Joe, you and everybody else have a chance for our next big giveaway. We're going back to Trophy Smack because they hook it up. It's championship ring giveaway time. We've teamed up with Trophy Smack to bring you an epic giveaway that will take your league celebrations to the next level. Introducing the Fantasy Pros Football Championship Ring from Trophy Smack, the ring that shouts victory. To be eligible, all you've got to do is subscribe to the Fantasy Pros YouTube channel, your ultimate source for fantasy football insights and updates. Leave a comment on any of our videos. Do it on this one, especially. And that's it. And the best part, we'll be announcing the lucky winner right here on the channel, just like we did with Joe. So don't forget to turn on those notifications. That way, you'll be the first to know when new episodes drop and when it's time to claim your exclusive prize. Get ready to elevate your fantasy football glory with the bling ring from Trophy Smack and stand out as a true champion that you are. Subscribe, comment, and let the bling do the talking. Gentlemen, it's rank time. Now, if everybody that's hanging along with us wants to go and check this out themselves, go to fantasypros.com/rankings. You can get the ECR rankings from Fantasy Pros. These are not Joe's ranks. These are not Bogman's ranks. Well, they are, because it's everybody's. It is the consensus rank around the industry with tons and tons of your favorite analysts out there, even Derrick Brown. Not just your other favorites. You can get all of those. It makes up the consensus here. And that's what we're going to be looking at. Just a shot at
all
Derrick
your
Brown.
Experts and Derrick Brown.
Brown. That's good. I like that.
Brandon Ayuk takes here. Well, me and Derrick will get at it with the Brandon Ayuk trade stuff. But we're not going to do that. We are going to talk about Ayuk in a little bit. So let's jump into it. FantasyPros.com/rankings half PPR expert consensus rankings. Gentlemen, here are the top 12. Christian McCaffrey comes in at number 1. CeeDee Lamb, number 2. Tyreek Hill, Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, and Amon-Ra St. Brown come in 3 through 6, all wide receivers. Then 7 and 8, Bijan Robinson, Breece Hall. That ends tier 1. It is an 8-person tier. Keep that in your mind here. Following up with A.J. Brown, Garrett Wilson, Puka Nacua, and Jonathan Taylor. Those are your top 12. So your standard half PPR 12-team league, those are your first rounders. So I jump to this. The way we view the tiers can be interchangeable. So yes, tier 1 is 8 players here, but cut this down in your idea of what tier 1 is based on the parameter of what you'd really draft. Because like how I view this, guys, when I do tiers is it has to be, I literally would move between these players to draft them at number 1. But I personally don't think there's any other pick besides Christian McCaffrey at number 1. So me personally, tier 1 would be Christian McCaffrey. Tier 2, would I really take Amon-Ra St. Brown at any point over CeeDee Lamb? No, I wouldn't. So I would break these into much more distinctive tiers. But what say you, Bogman? Let's start with how you might actually cut this tier 1 up based on the parameters that I'm talking about.
Yeah, if we're slicing it up, I would probably say 1 through 4 is a tier for me, because I think that Christian McCaffrey, along with Lamb, Hill, and whatever wide receiver you want to put in there. Yeah, I know Erickson has Chase. A lot of people have Jefferson. I don't. I have some running backs in there, obviously. I'm the running back guy. But I think that those 4 is probably what should be the first tier, is really CMC and the 3 wideouts.
Joe, same thing. So you look at this again, like I think my parameter is a little bit different. I don't see a scenario where like Amon-Ra St. Brown is going to jump over Tyreek or CeeDee Lamb, specifically the Christian McCaffrey stuff. How would you chop up tier 1 into a little bit more distinctive? Yes, this would never happen over this guy.
I do agree with your sentiment, which is there is a super elite group, but this 8 is the elite. I do believe that that's, these 8 guys are how I would prefer to start my team. I want one of them if I can. After that, you do have some holes you can poke about the Jets with Garrett Wilson and how all in Aaron Rodgers is. You could poke some holes in the, the second part of A.J. Brown season and Puka Nacua, obviously what he did last year. Can he repeat it? So there's a lot of that stuff. Jonathan Taylor, right, at 12. So this first 12, I do think there is a cutoff there. And that being said, I think the super elite tier is McCaffrey, Lamb, Hill, and Chase. But that's not my order necessarily overall, too, because I can't get past that 417 number, the number of touches for Christian McCaffrey last year. And we can bury our head in the sand about it and pretend like it doesn't matter. I'm not saying you can't take him 1. I'm not saying he's not going to be the best player in fantasy again this year. But when you have that kind of workload on a player, historically speaking, the next year isn't quite as good. It's just facts, and all the data backs it up. So CeeDee Lamb to me is the 1. McCaffrey at 2, I'm good with. After that, the Hill Chase conversation is really interesting. And I actually have Amon-Ra St. Brown ahead of Justin Jefferson, because I just like the situation he's in better this year. I think the Lions are really going to take off. They're one of my picks for the Super Bowl to get there this year from the NFC side. I just think it's their turn. It's their year. And I think they learn from those mistakes. So I think he's really set up for success. Whereas Jefferson, Darnold, JJ McCarthy, there's a lot of learning curve there. So certainly this is the 8 that I think you feel good about starting your team with, or better than anybody else. And if you're at the turn, I think you are kind of at the mercy of the turn a bit. I do also like Welsh that the ECR eventually has put Bijan ahead of Breece. I think that's going to be a better scoring environment period for fantasy for him. That was not the case about a month ago. That has flip-flopped, so I do think that there's progress there in the consensus.
So let's talk about that, actually, because I think that's a really important thing. Bogman alluded to this a little bit earlier. Bogman is a running back guy. Joe hates running backs. Those are just facts. There's nothing else between. There's no defending. Nope, there's no defending. But there will be a defense here, because, Joe, I want to ask you, do you think any of these running backs actually belong in tier 1? Now, I know you did kind of answer it where you're like, hey, this is the super tier of the 8. But, I mean, you are distinctively into wide receivers. You move McCaffrey off of number 1. So do you actually believe that Bijan and Breece belong in tier 1?
I do. And, it also depends. These are half-point PPR rankings we're talking about today, which you can see at fantasypros.com/rankings. But just yesterday in the half PPR mock show we did with Chris Allen, I think I was at the 10 spot, and I took Jahmyr Gibbs. So I actually went running back early there. So I do believe that Breece Hall, Bijan Robinson do belong in this conversation. Once those, and I do mean elite wide receivers where I can't poke any holes. The Jefferson thing, again, that's just trying to really slice very thin between him and Amon-Ra St. Brown. But I would be very happy to start my team with Justin Jefferson still this year. Bijan and Breece, to me, are those guys where even in full point PPRs, I'm very comfortable taking them in the top 8 there, because I do think that grouping next coming that we're going to talk about in that second tier, there are a little bit more questions there, and we're poking around a little bit in different ways. So I do feel much better about those two guys. So yes, even Mr. Wide Receiver will make some room at the table so we can all eat with some running backs.
Well, Boggs, you and I both are a little bit in the camp when you're talking about like elite of elite, where there's all this focus in the first round, these top 12 players becomes about, hey, there's wide receivers. They're so elite. They're so elite. But there is, in my mind, and I know you agree with this, there's a big tier gap between those top running backs. So how much higher, like this is for your chance to defend not only, yes, those Bijan and Breece Hall belong in the first round, but do you believe they should be jumping over some of those wide receivers?
Yeah, I do. I have them over, I think Chase. I have them over. No, I don't have them over Chase. I have them yes, I do. Chase and Jefferson. I have them both over those guys. And
Warshak. Where's Warshak?
Yeah, I don't know. But with those guys specifically, is like, I still think there's question at quarterback for both of them. You know, Aaron Rodgers is coming off the Achilles. He says he's great, everything. So is Kirk Cousins. And I just think that both these teams specifically early are going to focus on running the ball a ton with these quarterbacks that are coming off these injuries. And with Kirk Cousins, he's adjusting to a whole new system, right? So I just think they're going to be used a lot. I actually have Breece ahead of Bijan because I have so much respect for Tyler Algier as well. So I think that, and I don't think there's a back really that will challenge Breece at all for touches in New York. I know we're getting Braylon Allen hype and all that stuff, but I don't care. It's all Breece Hall to me. So I think both those guys, they're high volume guys. I think they're going to be used early as well and put up some big numbers early. So I have them ahead of a couple of the wide receivers.
Joey, you were we were privately messaging that you wanted to be polite about this, but you wanted to jump in. You may just jump in, my friend.
I wanted to just say that, I think the difference is, yes, they're both coming off the Achilles, and yes, Kirk Cousins has a little bit less time in that recovery window, but he is younger. So I'm a little bit more confident of that situation. I'm also more confident because the last version I saw of Kirk Cousins was still a very productive QB1 in fantasy. Whereas 2 years ago, writing up all the black book profiles for a quarterback every year, my Aaron Rodgers profile was a little rough last year going into the season. I said, look, everyone's trying to all of a sudden put a fresh paint of cone on him just because he's going to New York now. It's a new situation, but there were a lot of metrics there underlying that were not great, where you saw a drop off in Rodgers in terms of his fantasy equity. So I think that's a bigger reason of why, if you're going to try to say who is the best number 2 running back, I think there's a lot more reasons why you look at Bijan Robinson and you think that, okay, things can be better, because at the end of the day, fantasy productivity is tied to the quarterback play. If you have bad quarterback play, it's really tough to make those ancillary skill players.
But Breece was really good last year with bad quarterback play.
He was, but he was still limited in what his upside could be. And I do think the backup quarterback situation there is far better there. Should something happen to Rodgers again, or should they have to pivot, I think they're in a much better place potentially to do that than they were last year. That's a great point. But I also will put my faith in Kirk Cousins and what he has shown me, which is really hasn't shown much decline basically at all as he's aged here. The last couple of years in Minnesota have been tremendous for him.
Which Kirk do you like better, Kirk Cousins or Kirk Thuggins?
Thuggins for sure. Absolutely.
All the chains.
All the chains.
All right. Lots of tier 1 conversation. Tier 2, again, just want to remind AJ Brown, Garrett Wilson, Puka Nacua, Jonathan Taylor, Bogman, as we end up this tier here. Your favorite of this group of 4. I know it does extend into the next round, but just as a focal point of these tier 4 guys that we're looking at 1 through 12, talk to me about your favorite.
My favorite, like value from round 1? Is that what you're asking?
Your favorite of tier 2, whether it's AJ Brown, whether it's Jonathan Taylor moving up, Puka Nacua, who's your favorite target? Tier 1, tier 2.
It's still AJ Brown. I mean, AJ Brown is still incredible. I know he had a bad second half last season. I don't care. Like, he is a little bit of a whiner. I understand that. Well, honestly, like, he goes on the sideline. They beat the Vikings, and he's over there complaining he's not getting more receptions. Like, bro, we're winning. So he demands the ball. He's still one of the best wide receivers in the league. I am not worried about a bad second half because Jaylen was kind of banged up and bad also. So AJ Brown, we've seen is quarterback proof. I have no issues taking AJ.
I mean, Weiner and wide receiver,
They go hand in hand. But I mean, for a wide receiver, AJ Brown is even a whiner.
I don't know about that.
Bad.
There's some pretty big whiners out there. Joe, the tier 2 guys, it is pretty heavy wide receiver, but we do have Jonathan Taylor in there. Do you have a favorite that you want to highlight here of the tier 2 guys?
I do. And I think part of this also has to do with, like, I don't want to just, piggyback on what Bogman was saying. I do agree AJ Brown would be the standout guy for me, where I still feel very comfortable. If he ends up slipping to me at 9 or 10 or even 11, if people push up some other guys, like, that's great. I'll take AJ Brown. But there's a guy that is in this next quote unquote round, but still in this tier, which is Jahmyr Gibbs. And the reason why I keep going to Gibbs is I know people are still concerned, well, David Montgomery's there, he's going to lose some touchdowns to him. Last time I checked, am I crazy, or did he not have 10 rushing touchdowns last year? And that was also basically mostly in the second half of the season. Because the first 4 weeks of the season, the guy did nothing. Then he got hurt. People wanted to trade him. They wanted to drop him. And you see things click when you have patience with Jahmyr Gibbs. And I look at Gibbs and I'm saying, okay, who can I envision next year being in this first round conversation in that elite group? And I think he is set up again for success. I keep coming back for Detroit. I think they're a team on the upswing, and that offensive ecosystem is really good. So what if, and I'm going to pose this question, you guys, what if we don't have the slow start? What if the first 6 weeks of the season look like the last 8 weeks of last season? Oh my goodness. He is going to be an absolute stud, and he is younger than guys like Barkley, and I just think in a really interesting situation. So Gibbs is that guy that I am willing to reach for, especially if I'm looking for a running back in a half PPR in the first round.
Yeah, and I think this also speaks to the running backs in general of, like, the priority of the I know everybody wants wide receivers, but when you're on that back end of the first round and there's the wheel in there are only a handful of those guys. There's only a handful, and Jahmyr Gibbs is one of them.
I have a stat from one of the ITL shows, the one I just did with Andrew Erickson about numbers we love. Dave Montgomery, weeks 1 through 9, was 7th in half PPR scoring, 16.4. Gibbs was 12th. 9 through 17, Gibbs was 5th. And Montgomery was 13th. They've already talked about giving Gibbs a bigger workload this year. Mm-hmm. So I also have Gibbs in the first round.
All right. Yep. Well, that's going to take us 13 to 24. But before we do, and we talk about the next tiers, I want to tell you guys about our friends over at DraftKings. Because the beautiful thing about being a sports fan, there's only like 2 days the whole year without a game too. So with so much happening all year round, that is why you've got to be with our friends over at DraftKings Sportsbook. It's super easy for first-timers to get started. Try betting on something simple like picking a team to win. Go to DraftKings Sportsbook app, select your team, place your first bet, and boom, it really couldn't be any easier or any simpler. Baseball, golf, UFC, there's something for every fan of every sport to bet on at DraftKings. And I know it's early, but the NFL season, as we're talking about it, it's almost here, and it's going to be here before you knew it. And if you're new to DraftKings, you got to check this out. New customers bet $5 and can get $150 in bonus bets instantly. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use code FantasyPros. That's code FantasyPros for new customers to get $150 in bonus bets instantly when you bet just $5. Only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. Gentlemen, we are moving on up. We are going 13 through 24. And we're going to bring in a new tier. So, Joe, you kind of alluded to Jahmyr Gibbs and Saquon Barkley coming in at 13 and 14. Those are tier 2 guys. But now we are going into this big old tier 3, which is the entirety of 15 through 24. Coming in at 15, we've got Devonta Adams. We've got Chris Olave at 16, Travis Etienne at 17, Brandon Ayuk, will he be a 49er at 18, Kyren Williams, Josh Allen, Derrick Henry, Drake London, Mike Evans. And, over the last month or so, Marvin Harrison Jr. has fallen a little bit. Also could be some differences between PPR and half PPR. So, Joe, let's start with you. Do you believe the running backs, which there are 5 in this range, 13 through 24, are a higher talent or match the talent of the available wide receivers that are here through 13 through 24?
That's an interesting question. Matching the talent. I will take Gibbs. Again, I already said that over anybody in tier 3 easily, except for one guy who's actually at the very bottom of this tier, and it's Marvin Harrison Jr. I don't know why he is falling at all in any sort of ECR ranks.
He was like 11, I want to say, like a month ago, if you guys paid attention to the ranks.
I've actually moved him up. He is actually 11 in my overall ranks right now, because that's a situation where you're looking at it and it's very clear who the big alpha dog is. It's just a few years ago where DeAndre Hopkins had 1,400 receiving yards with Kyler Murray. It's not like Kyler Murray can't sustain a true alpha dog, big time wide receiver. So now we're dropping in a guy who's young, who's a great route runner, experienced. The NFL is not going to be too big of a stage for him. He's in an offense where he's not competing with targets for anybody except for Trey McBride. And I love Trey McBride, but it's a different position. It's a different animal. We're talking about the guy where it's all laid out there. And we have seen some incredible rookie seasons from some of these wide receivers. I don't understand why he is not being valued properly right now in the CCR. I think it's a huge outlier. I think Marvin Harrison Jr. could come away with 100 receptions, 1,300 yards, and 10 touchdowns, if not more, easily this year. And the reason why I say easily is because you also factor in the defense is not very good. They're not putting anybody away here and then just waiting and playing some defense. They're going to be in shootout after shootout, and the other offenses in this division are going to put points on the board in the games against the Arizona Cardinals. Not to mention everybody else in the league is going to put up points against the Arizona Cardinals. So I don't know why he is where he is. I think it's too low. And to answer your question, Gibbs, Barkley, I like those guys better. I'm looking at the rest of this grouping here. Uncertainty with Ayuk. Travis Etienne has had some good moments and some not so good moments. Chris Olave does have to play with Derek Carr. It was good. I wouldn't say great. I don't know if great is in the cards. Devontae Adams has been in the league for a decade now, and we saw the second half of Stephon Diggs after he'd been in the league a decade and what that looked like last year. Kyron Williams' foot issue. So as this tier goes on, I like it more. I like the Derrick Henrys. I like the Drake Londons. But more than anyone, I like the Marvin Harrison Jr., and I think you're getting a huge value. If for some reason he falls to you in the late second round, jump on that. I did yesterday. If you want to see what that build looks like, again, go to yesterday's show, listen or watch on the YouTube channel, because I started my team with Jahmyr Gibbs and Marvin Harrison Jr. at 10, and that is a great start in my bank in terms of like where I have players ranked.
So, Boggs, the question I think is really important here, and I want you to hit it on this being more of the running back, because I think people know what I'm alluding to, is you have running back 9 up to represented in the top 2 rounds, but you're into wide receiver 14. So you're already into the wide receiver 2s. You have not left the RB1s. So BPA is like your best position that you always want to do, especially early in drafts, getting maybe too hyper-focused. But conceptually, in valuing these guys, I think it is an important question to ask yourself, do the running backs that show up in here, do they match the talent, or are they a higher talent than these same wide receivers that are showing up?
Yeah, it's funny because I actually have a running back that is below ECR in this group, and that is the one guy that I think probably doesn't match up talent here, and it's Travis Etienne. But I think Gibbs, Barkley, and I have Derrick Henry much higher than 21. You haven't even mentioned him yet.
Me too.
I think those guys match the talent. I don't think Kyron does. Kyron had the least amount of 8-man boxes in the NFL last year. It was 4.8%, which was the lowest by like 5%. Now, I still have him ranked pretty high because I don't think a lot is changing with the Rams. In fact, they get Puka on his second year. They get Cooper Kupp back healthy. And Matt Stafford is still there. I still think Kyron is going to get light boxes. So I do have him ranked high. But in terms of talent, he's not in that group with Saquon and Gibbs and Derrick Henry at all. I like Travis Etienne a lot. I don't think he's in that group either. So in terms of talent, you're absolutely correct. There is a big tier gap. And this is what I keep saying. You have to play the wide receiver game. Even if you're a guy that likes running backs like me, you cannot skip wide receiver because it is an arms race right now. And the talent quickly supersedes the running backs. So,
yeah, and I think this also comes back to when you're how I view this, like Gibbs and Barkley, they are outside of the tier, rightfully so. I actually think where I kind of disagree with like what tier 1 looks like, and I have smaller chunks of it, I really agree with what this looks like, because I think from Barkley to Adams or Olave, there's a big difference. But then you start talking in of matching talent from Henry to Olave. I think that's like a really interesting one of getting that type of running back versus the wide receivers that are available. We're going to move on in just one second, but Joe, pose your question to Bogman.
Yeah, I had a question, Box. Where do you have Derrick Henry? Because you mentioned you have him higher than everybody else, and I was curious because so do I in terms of consensus. So this is a weird place where I like a running back more than consensus. It is a little chicken. I have my number.
Okay, how about this? I'm gonna start the chicken. Here's what you gentlemen are going to do.
All right.
I would like you to make a buzzer sound. My buzzer sound is it's a turkey. Joe, can I please hear your buzzer sound? Just
cluck cluck.
Okay. Bogman, what would your buzzer sound be? Perfect. All right.
That's the same as
Shakira.
Welsh.
Yeah, that's fine, but I'm not going to play this game. So,
Shakira.
Yeah, it's Shakira. 21 is his ECR. Buzz in if you are higher. Can I get 18 overall?
Higher.
So buzz.
So, cluck cluck.
Okay, yeah.
I love your buzzing when you hit the number.
You guys are great at this game. 16
right,
overall.
Cluck cluck.
Oh, I love your cluck cluck. 15 overall.
Cluck.
All right. Cluck. Okay, one cluck. 12 overall, first round.
Nah.
Okay, so you guys are between 15. So now let's hear the numbers. I have unclucked you and you. So Joe, I'm very careful about that.
I've never been unclucked before.
Joe, what did I sign up for today?
What is your number?
My number for Derrick Henry is actually 13. That's where I have my
Bogman, you can't beat that.
Yeah, I can because mine is 13.
You guys are both 13?
Yeah. Dude, you're talking about one of the best running backs in the history of the game who doesn't age, by the way, is a freak of nature. And he is going to work with the best running back or the best running quarterback in the league. That RPO is going to be insane. Mm-hmm. And every time they're at the goal line, who is the ball going to? And by the way, Ravens get to the goal line way more than the Titans did last season. So, and this guy already faced stack boxes because Will Levis sucks and he was good. So, I mean, everything adds up for me to Derrick Henry having a big year. The only thing you got to watch out for with a guy of his age is injury. And he is a bit of a freak
right?
nature.
It's the only knock people have is
to worry
injury.
about that with every running back.
There's no performance concerns. He played on a terrible offense last year. And as Bogman said, he was terrific there. And now I'm looking at it. He's going to the Ravens, a team that ran the ball more efficiently than anybody else basically last year and more prolifically than anybody else. And now what? I'm supposed to like him less? I don't get that. I don't understand it at all. Jonathan Taylor had injuries last year and the year before. So we're talking about injuries and concerns. I was like, Derrick Henry is a monster. Derrick Henry is not like any other running back. And I understand that the age is definitely something we can have that conversation about. But until it shows up in his performance, I'm sorry. I'm still aggressive on Derrick Henry, especially in half PPR.
Yeah, and I'm not disagreeing. I'm just shocked that you guys agree on a running back. And Joe, that was surprising. Yeah, so clock. Oh, man. This is going to be a great game in the future.
Welsh.
All right, let's move. We got a couple more in this 13 through 24 with the end of tier 2 and tier 3. Bogman, I'm going to jump to you. This is always this I think is actually one of the most interesting things that happens in ranks and site ranks. When you go and draft on specific sites, you always see the quarterbacks going higher. There's always somebody. But do you believe that a quarterback belongs in this range? Because Josh Allen shows up at 20 in the top 2 rounds. Do you buy a quarterback in the top 24?
Absolutely not. No way. I'm not doing it. And Josh Allen put up so many points last year, but I think he's my first quarterback, right? And I have him at 32. So I have him lower into the lower end of the 3rd round. So I know I'm not going to have a high-end quarterback probably at any point. That's fine. I will wait. I think there are so many QB options, specifically this year with this draft class producing a bunch more for us. I think that there's too many quarterbacks for me to invest early. If I'm going to go to a different position earlier, it's going to be tight end. I have LaPorta at 24, so he sneaks into my 2nd round, but I would rather go tight end than quarterback in most scenarios.
Joe, same thing. Do you think the scarcity, I mean, like there's not really a scarcity, but like there are the high-end guys. Do you think the value of having the high-end guys justifies pushing them into the 2nd round, into tier 3?
Not into the 2nd round, no. I don't. I have them right in the beginning of the 3rd round, though, because I do think, especially in the half scoring, that makes a big difference. Now, in PPR, we can have a different conversation. And I think yesterday I gave a good roadmap to, if you're doing late round QB, I ended up getting Jordan Love, I think, in the 10th round or something like that. That's perfectly fine by me. A guy who played lights out in the 2nd half. I'm going to get fantasy points from there. Brock Purdy was still hanging around there late in the draft. Jared Goff is still hanging around. So from a strategy standpoint, no. From a value standpoint, still no, because I actually have Mahomes as my number 1 quarterback going into this year. I like what the Chiefs have done in the offseason. I don't think it's possible that Josh Allen is going to have the same amount of rushing touchdowns he did last year. Same thing
That's
goes
the big
for
thing. 15. He had like 3 years in a row of 7 or whatever.
Right. It was like 8, 7. It was like hovering around that range. And now you're going to double it, and now it's going to come back again. I just don't see that happening necessarily. That would be a very weird statistical anomaly. But I do have in a row then in my ranks, I do have Mahomes at 25 and then Allen and Hurts. So yeah, so right there in the third round is when you can start pulling the trigger. But I don't want to be the first person to pull the trigger on that, because I do think you can wait and then gauge and say, okay, well, I can wait a little bit longer, maybe pull Lamar, maybe pull Anthony Richardson or somebody else. I think those guys are in that same elite fantasy conversation for quarterbacks as well.
Interesting thing to look at too, not only Allen, but like Hurts, you now have Saquon Barkley in there. Like you can look in theory the not repeatability, the negative regression for rushing touchdowns for Allen, but also Hurts is now going to have a guy like Saquon Barkley in there, and he has been so valuable on that. So the quarterbacks being pushed is weird. Last thing in this, Joe, your favorite 13 to 24 that is not named Derrick Henry. So just a guy that you want to pinpoint in this second round.
Not named Derrick Henry. Well, it is Marvin Harrison Jr., so I don't want to go too much over that. Again, it's all those reasons I keep laying out. Now, I think you can make an argument also that Saquon, with a chip on his shoulder, playing for the Eagles with that offensive line, even though they don't have Kelce, that could be a great spot for him, statistically speaking, but he has had a myriad of injuries over the years, and every year there always seems to be something. If he stays healthy in this offense, he could end up returning an incredible value. He could be a top 3. He could even challenge for the 1 spot. That's not an absurd notion to think about right now, where Saquon is at this juncture in his career. But I still go with Marvin Harrison Jr. in this grouping.
Bogman, for this, a guy that maybe you have higher, or a guy that wasn't in this that you want to boost up, that you want to target, just a tier 3. Essentially, these are all tier 3 players.
Sure.
But a guy that you want to highlight, again, that this could be a player that you have way higher, not Derrick Henry, or even lower out of it.
Yeah, Derrick Henry is probably the guy. I didn't talk about him much, but Marvin Harrison, I have at 15, so I'm high on him. The other guy that I'm high on in this group of 13 through 24 is Mike Evans. He's 23. I'm slightly ahead on him at 22, but you bring Baker Mayfield back, you're going to run it back. You're going to have a lot of the same. I know Canales left, but there's no reason to change the offense after he left. It worked. It ain't broke. Don't fix it. So keep doing more of the same until Mike Evans shows us that he's slowing down. He ain't slowing down. So I'm probably going to roster Mike Evans in a bunch of spots.
All right, we are going to jump tiers and we're going to jump ranks. But first, you guys need to know the Draft Wizard is your friend. Yes, you can start creating the perfect rankings, everything we're talking about for your league with the Cheat Sheet Creator. You can add tiers just like we're talking about. This is what I would do. I would start actually microing these tiers a bit and sync your league to create custom ranks based on your league settings. Visit fantasypros.com/draftwizard or use the Cheat Sheet Creator on the Fantasy Football Draft Wizard app to dominate your league. Again, go and download the Fantasy Football Draft Wizard app and check it out, fantasypros.com/draftwizard. Dominate today, because it's a great day to dominate. All right, let's go to 25 through 36 quarterbacks. Jalen Hurts comes in at 25. My guy behind me, helmet, Debo, comes in at 26. We've got Nico Collins at 27. 28 is Travis Kelce. And let's add a tier. We're going now to tier 4. Those guys were tier 3. Tier 4 starts with Jaylen Waddle at 29, followed by DJ Moore, Isaiah Pacheco, Devon Achane, Sam LaPorta, DK Metcalf, Michael Pittman, and Patrick Mahomes coming in at 3. Bogman, we are going to start with you. Tight ends show up finally in this rank range. But there's a separator. There's a tier separation between Travis Kelce and Sam LaPorta. Many have got LaPorta over Kelce. So let's get rid of the Kelce over LaPorta thing for a second. Do you believe there deserves and should be a tier difference between these two tight ends?
I do, and anyone who's listened to me knows my strategy in tight ends. It breaks 3 ways. It is elite, it is Brock Bowers, and then it is take somebody at the very end. That is how I have it. And in the mocks that I've done recently this season, it's all been I wait on a tight end. But I do think that LaPorta and Kelce specifically, and McBride, who is not on this list, which we'll talk about in the last section. But I think that, yes, there are some tight ends that absolutely deserve to be in this range.
Okay, but I think you missed my question. My question is, should there be a tier break between Kelce and LaPorta?
No.
Those guys are different tiers.
No, there should not be.
Okay, that's what I'm curious about, Joe. So this is the same thing. Wherever your take is on tight ends, and I think a lot of people are kind of in that Bogman range, that it's Kelce or LaPorta. Again, I don't really necessarily care where your specific rank is, but I care that there is a tier difference.
So much that Kelce is one, LaPorta is one, but then in the overall that Kelce is one. It ruined his day. When I told him about
he's talking about like positional.
So.
It's because like how people will rank their overall, it can mess with that. But again, like whatever side you go on, you're probably going to be on that same, like I value the tight ends, but showing a tier break is showing a value change. And Joe, do you believe there's a value difference between LaPorta and Travis Kelce?
I don't know if there's a value difference. They are right neck and neck. I had Kelce early on still over LaPorta. I love what LaPorta did last year. I love the Lions. Obviously, I've said that, but I think we're not giving Kelce enough respect too. He was hurt most of last year. The offense was dreadful most of last year at times. The wide receiver core is terrible. So if that wide receiver core improves, all of a sudden a healthy Kelce and a better group of wide receivers actually catching the football, we could go right back to being, oh my God, Travis Kelce is the greatest fantasy tight end on the planet again. That range of outcomes is not hard to see, as Derrick Brown likes to say. So I don't think they're a tier difference. I do think they belong in this tier, both of them, in this 3-4 conversation without a doubt. And I have to say, I kind of love the value you're getting, depending on who goes off that board. Like, we want to have a conversation, a real talk conversation. Kelce and LaPorta in this same conversation with DJ Moore, right? I love DJ Moore. He's very consistent, but now he's playing with a rookie quarterback who has a ton of talent. But Travis Kelce is playing with the best quarterback in the league, with Patrick Mahomes, and we have Sam LaPorta playing with somebody who's already proven that he can make him a tight end one in fantasy, make him basically wide receiver worthy. So in terms of consistency, I think it's a great conversation to have, that maybe if you don't love DK Metcalf, if you don't love Michael Pittman, pivoting in this range to one of those tight ends, I think is a very viable strategy. And you're getting a huge discount considering in the past what Kelce's value was, which was a fringe round one player. To get him anything close to a third round talent now, I think is a huge value and could be a league winner.
Joe, let's go back to Welsh's question when he asked me, do I think that the running back talent is the same as the wide receiver talent in 13 through 24? Do you think that the tight ends are better than the wide receivers here in this section? They're just less value positionally because, it is like three real groups of tight ends. You have the upper tier, right, the middle tier, the low tier, which can go to 20. Because there's less positional value at tight end, are we taking more talented players later?
I don't want to say better. I want to say on par. That's my answer to the question. Okay. They are on par statistically. Like, I could see Travis Kelce having a similar statistical season to Nico Collins when all is said and done, or even Jaylen Waddle when all is said and done. The one thing I will say is, we've seen it numerous times out of Travis Kelce. We've seen it once out of Nico Collins, right? I think that is where I would start to make that conversation happen in a bigger, more of a meta conversation, right, about how you want to invest in talent to build your fantasy roster. And yeah, Kelce's older and maybe he's in the twilight years, but he signed a 2-year deal. And I don't think it's lost on, as soon as the Super Bowl is over, all they were talking about is winning the next one. This team knows that they have history that they are chasing, and that is not lost on these guys. They're enormous competitors. If you think that like Travis Kelce isn't focused because he's hanging out at concerts and doing stuff like that, you're nuts. These guys know exactly what they're trying to do. And if they do it, they're going to go from legacy team to legendary team. And I think that is well within their grasp and certainly in their sphere and right in the front of their heads about what their goals are for this year. And it starts with Kelce in that offense. It always has. And I think it always will until further notice.
So there's an oddity. There's a great tight end conversation here, but there's like another player that I think could belong, because like I would tick down this little box, the tier, because there's another guy that jumped out to me, and it's Jaylen Waddle. And Jaylen Waddle to me feels a little misplaced. I have taken him in every mock we've done here on Fantasy Pros over on ITL because he always seems to be a value. And you guys have talked about Nico. We've talked about Debo. There's a couple wide receivers that are even below. But specifically Nico and Debo, am I wrong here that Jaylen Waddle feels displaced, not only in rank, but tier, specifically versus Nico and Debo? Joe, let's start with you.
A little bit, yeah. And it's something that I know Fitz and I have talked about on a lot of shows. We see it very similarly. And I think that in those worlds where you are looking at going running back early and you're trying to make up that deficit, right? You're trying to find wide receivers who can jump a tier. a guy who's being drafted as a 2 that can play as a 1, a guy who's drafted as a 3 that can play as a 2, so on and so forth. That's how you win leagues. If you can find those guys, that's why I'm so high on McLaurin this year, because I think he can play like a 2, but he's being drafted as a 3. I think Waddle right now is being drafted as a 2, but could play as a 1 or 1A, and it's because I just saw it not that long ago. It's not something that is really difficult to look back and go, oh, well, maybe he can't be. I mean, he was just in 2022 wide receiver 7 at 1,300 yards, and Tyreek Hill was there last time I checked at that same season. So it's not out of the realm of possibilities. Jaylen Waddle's health was the issue last year. Hill's another year older. And then on top of that, follow the money. They gave Jaylen Waddle an extension. They know what's going on here in this wide receiver market. They know how important Waddle is to this offense. He's young. He's fast. He's shown you already he can be prolific in this offense. So yeah, to a certain degree, I do think he's being undervalued. And I think it's great. And I don't see it changing in this marketplace. I think the names ahead of him in this rank in the ECR are too trendy for whatever reason that he is not going to leapfrog, I don't think, a Nico Collins anytime soon. Maybe he will, but I just don't see that happening.
And what's so interesting too about it is it's like, I mean, I personally, Homer, I love Debo and stuff like that, but both Nico and Debo, there's a lot of mouths to feed in both of those offenses. And if you're going to make that case of like, oh, Tyreek Hill, okay, but Jaylen Waddle is at times one of the number 1 receiving options on that team, and they slang the ball. I know they have a lot of running back options, but it's like 3 guys that all a lot of mouths to feed, yet he is pushed out of the tier, Bogman. Do you think he's misplaced in this?
No, not even. I have him lower, so
really?
I don't have him in this tier. And look, well, because it's the wide receivers are so good here. Like I think we're missing that. We don't have Malik Neighbors is going to be peppered with targets. He's going to have maybe the highest target share of any wide receiver in the league. And who led last year? Tyreek Hill, 32%, highest target share in the NFL last season. So Waddle plays like a 1, and on a lot of teams he would be a 1. If we're talking in terms of talent, yes, he is underranked. But with Tyreek Hill, who is my number 3 player, I can't put him much higher. So
but do you have Nico and Debo above him then?
I do, yeah, I do.
That's where I'm kind of lost. Like there are 3.
I don't
there are
understand
3
where you're lost. Debo runs too. He scores touchdowns. Nothing is guaranteed touchdown wise for Jaylen Waddle.
Yeah,
Nico Collins was one of like 15 players since PFF started tracking it that had an over 3 yards per route run last season. That's why I'm more confident in Nico. He's also top 10 against man and against zone. So Nico can do it regardless of what spot you're in. So I think Nico is a 1, and I think Waddle is firmly a 2 behind Hill. So
very interesting.
And so he's in a tier to me. I don't hate him. I understand why he's here, and I understand if you want to take him. I don't hate it. Just for me, there's a couple guys I'm taking over Waddle.
Okay, so let's end this out then. That's a top 36. I was even going to try to poke around, hey, who should be in and out of this? But I mean, you got that right there. You just threw Waddle out the door, so he's out of it. The 37 through 50, there's a lot of names. I don't think I'm going to list them off. You guys can visually see them. I would tell everybody, go to fantasypros.com/rankings. You can check them all, but it's from Lamar Jackson to Cooper Kupp down to Alvin Kamara at 50. Joe, let's do this with you. Who do you think, whom of this 37 through 50? A lot of these guys are also tier 4. It goes down to Stephon Diggs, Houston, at 45. And then it starts tier 5 with like 5 players going down to 50. Who would you push into that top 36 since that's been our focus of this range? Is there a guy that you value a lot better?
I don't think there's anybody I want to push into that range, but I will say this. Lamar Jackson, I think you can make the argument, is a better investment than Devon Achane overall. Now, Achane it could be great. It could blow up. It could be fantastic. We saw these glimpses of it. But if you're talking about weekly, every single week, scoring fantasy points and having a guy that can go out there and just rack them up for you, Lamar Jackson can win you weeks. I know Devon Achane can too, but it's hard to win you weeks when you're not playing. And if he can't stay on the field, that is a huge problem in terms of the draft capital you have to use to take him. Now, I'm not saying he should be ranked ahead of him. I think he should. Cooper Kupp is an interesting one, too, where you can write a story and look at it and say, well, Cooper Kupp is not going to go quietly into that good night. Cooper Kupp is actually going to say, yeah, you know what? I'm not done, and I'm going to come back and show you how good I am. And that could be possible. We could find him leapfrogging and becoming super relevant again and becoming a guy in the top 10 wide receivers. That's not an impossibility. What makes him so interesting, I love him as a wide receiver 3, as a wide receiver 2. I get kind of the jitters about him, but I think he's ranked appropriately for that different range of outcomes. And then the last one is, I think we could be looking up next year and saying, how in the hell did we have Anthony Richardson ranked so low? How could we have him at 47? Because he should be right there in that conversation right after or with the elite quarterbacks going in the third round. So those are the three names outside that I think you can make cases for the inside, which is why they're very intriguing picks at their current ADP, because they can leapfrog the value.
Very interesting for a guy that wants to talk about Jordan Love and Brock Purdy. How much quarterback love you give like 5 quarterbacks that you're in love with inside the top like 50, Joe.
I do. Well, because I think people forget we play weekly head to head. This is fantasy football, right? And locking in those guys that can win you weeks is very important. Yeah, you can stream some wide receivers, and yeah, there's going to be injuries and off the waiver wire for running backs, and guys are going to pop up. I mean, just the Cleveland Browns alone gave us 5,000 running backs last year, right? So why can't we look at this and say to ourselves, yeah, hey, let's look at these quarterbacks and say, in terms of fantasy investment, sure, you can make that case, but you have to have a plan. And most importantly, you have to have those wide receivers circled on your board or use the cheat sheets, right? And look at the ranks of Boggs or myself or any of the analysts here and try to say, who are the guys that rank, and maybe Welsh, and who are the guys that are going to rank there and jump those tiers where I can make up that deficit if I do go early quarterback. Because if you don't have a good feel for that, it is a strategy that can backfire on you.
Bogman, who is on the outside that should be on the inside, and why is their name Ken Walker?
I do have Ken Walker. He's my number one here. I think that the Seahawks are going to focus on running the ball more. I know that Grubb comes over from Washington, and they had the three-headed monster at wide receiver at Washington last year, and Michael Penix. Let me just tell you guys, Geno Smith ain't Michael Penix. Okay, so Geno Smith is past his prime. He may be pushed by Sam Howell. They love Sam Howell, so I think this team is going to run the ball a ton. So I have Kenneth Walker in my third round as well as 2 other high usage backs, James Cook, Rachaad White. I think we're both sleeping on those guys a little bit. They're high usage, specifically Rachaad White, even though I have James Cook better, higher ranked because I think James Cook is a better back. The other 2 guys, I have Lamar, like Joe, so we're simpatico in that. Wouldn't put him over Devin Achane, but I do have him in my third round. And then the last one is Trey McBride, who I have ranked higher than any of the guys I've already listed at 26, because he is going – yes, Marvin Harrison is going to come in and, take a bunch of targets and stuff, but Trey McBride can be a whole offense. He was last year for the Cardinals. He was at Colorado State. This is a guy that is getting the ball. Everybody knows it, and he still gets open even at the NFL level. He did it last year. I think he's proven. I think he's going to score a ton of touchdowns. I'm super excited about Trey McBride this year.
Well, even though I would be way more micro about these tiers, we went, even talking about the 50, we barely got into the 5s. I would have a lot more tiers. You two gentlemen are my tier 1s. You're always my tier 1s. You can find them at Joe Pisapia 17, Bogman at Bogman Sports on the Twitter. You can find me at IsItTheWelsh. But I have a couple tasks for you all here. Want to check out the ranks? Go to fantasypros.com/rankings. You guys can kind of follow along. You can check them out. You can break them down. You want to make customized sheets, things we're talking about. You want a little bit more Joe, a little bit more Bogman, a little bit more of me, whatever you want. Go to fantasypros.com/draftwizard and you can create custom draft sheets. You can sync your leagues. You can get customized reports throughout how your league is scoring. It's really endless. And you can check out the Draft Wizard app, download it, and have it all at your fingertips. And then, of course, go and get ready to make some comments on this video and all the others so you can get the bling ring from Trophy Smack. That's all you got to do. You got to make sure you're following us here on YouTube, like it, make a comment, and you are entered, my friends, and you could be the winner of Trophy Smack's bling ring. We'll be announcing it right here, so make sure you do have those notifications on so you don't miss it. That's going to do it. Thank you guys for hanging out for all the rankings and all the tiers and with us right here at Fantasy Pros. We'll talk to you next time, friends. Peace.
See you.
Cluck.